Okay, hello everybody, my name is Àngela Bàez, and today I will be sharing with you some information about metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning. There are some research recommendations done by Dale Shank in 2008. In order to approach these 6 specific recommendations, we need to take into account that from 1960s there was a shift from psychological conditioning theory to cognition, which was focused on the learner instead of the environment surrounding the learner. This brought some effects on cognitive psychology, which were to take into account sensory registers, short-term memory, long-term memory, and control processes. And in this specific field of metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning, it's important to know that those are control processes, and those are influential types of cognitive control processes. So some authors talking about these specific terms were Fox and Rinconsett in 2008 talking about metacognition, Loyens talking about self-regulation, and Winters talking about self-regulated learning in 2008. It is really important to know here that self-regulation and self-regulated learning are two different concepts. Okay, we can start now from a moment in which this research had been done and to have an assessment time. Why assessment? Because it is important to know that even though these theoretical people were talking about these 3 concepts, many questions are now without answer regarding these 3. So that's why Shank is proposing these 6 recommendations for research in order to tackle the problem of the unanswered questions regarding these topics. The first one is to provide clear definitions. Clear definitions of what? Of these 3 concepts. How we define concepts influences the measures we use to assess them and how we interpret the results, the data collected throughout the research process. So at this point, it's really important to know what is the specific meaning of these 3. Metacognition, we all know that we are talking about cognition, knowledge, cognitive activity that is taken as an object of study, cognition. Self-regulation, which is the influence of external environment by engaging in the self-observation, self-judgment, and self-reaction. And finally, we have self-regulated learning, which is the learning process in which students activate and sustain cognition and behaviors oriented toward the attainment of their learning goals. So it is really important to take into account here that researchers have a tendency to use technical terms without defining them, which is going to get the reader confused because it is not a must to know every single concept when we approach a research report. Then we have to identify relevant theories. It's the second recommendation. Why to identify relevant theories? Because research must be linked with theory. And if research is disconnected from a conceptual framework, it will not offer clear implications for educational policy and practice. So if our research is not based on reliable theory, our results are not going to be useful. But in this case, we need to know that in the field of metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning, there are more people involved than the names that we already know. We know Flavel, Ventura, Zimmerman, but we have people like the ones I mentioned before, Fox and Rinconsett, Loyens, Winters, talking about this. But the main thing here is that we must know who are the ones that are leading research in this field so we can have reliable information about it. The third recommendation is to ensure that assessments clearly reflect processes. Why? Because research assessments are operational translations of the process defined. Basically, the assessment must explain how measures are reliable and valid indicators of the variables studied. Okay? Then we continue with the fourth recommendation, which is to link processes with academic outcomes. What's the problem here? Researchers have been developing a sort of strategies to evaluate metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning that are not totally connected with the outcomes in the class. For example, some specific papers to assess these outcomes, when a more reliable strategy would be observing consistently the processes of the learners. The fifth recommendation in this article is to conduct more educational developmental research. Metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated processes only improve through development. So it is necessary to go and develop these processes inside the classroom. For example, self-regulation. To develop self-regulation, we need instruction and guidance, and those are external factors, external influences, which must be internalized. What happens here? That research should be done on how to facilitate that internalization at various development levels to have critical implications for educational processes. Basically, everything here must point to education, because when we teach on metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated processes, we are teaching a person how to learn by its own. Finally, we have here to type processes firmly with instructional methods. Why? Because the processes of research in metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning are totally away from what they are supposed to be tied to. Metacognitive and self-regulatory processes need to be linked with methods designed specifically to develop them. For example, goal setting. In terms of goal setting, we need self-evaluation of progress, which should be the method to develop self-regulated learning, which is the process. So it's necessary to be totally aware of this. So, to summarize, it is necessary to provide clear definitions, identify relevant theories, ensure that assessments clearly reflect processes, link processes with academic outcomes, conduct more educational developmental research, and tie processes firmly with instructional methods. That way, we are really gonna have the complete effect of what metacognition, self-regulation, and self-regulated learning are supposed to be in our research educational field. Thank you so much for watching this video, and see you soon.